Guys, welcome to the podcast. This is going to be a fun episode talking about elk hunting, archery elk hunting in Arizona Unit 8, but I think a lot of the information that you hear on this podcast can be carried over to any unit in Arizona and any unit actually in the Southwest. So hopefully you get a lot of good, valuable information off of this podcast. Before we get into the episode, guys, I want to thank the sponsors of this podcast, and I want to remind you guys, or I guess let you guys know, that GoHunt.com, the title sponsor of this podcast, has extended the $1,000 giveaway. So they are giving away, they gave away a $1,000 gift card to the GoHunt Gear Shop to anyone that purchased anything from the gear shop, whether it be any type of gear, by ordering off the website or calling Cody Nelson, the optics manager. But all of the gear, all you had to do was buy anything and get entered into the drawing. If you spent $12, you got 12 entries. If you spent $2,000, you got 2,000 entries. Well, they had such a good response that they are going to extend that for the month of July. So all you have to do is go to GoHunt.com, go to the gear shop, order anything on the gear shop, or call Cody Nelson at 702-847-8747 extension 2. Tell him you want to be in the J. Scott drawing for the $1,000 gift card. If you're ordering online, use the J. Scott 19 promo code, and that's going to get you into that drawing for that $1,000 gift card. I want to thank GoHunt for their sponsorship. I want to thank Cody Nelson, my friend of 20 plus years, the optics manager at GoHunt.com. If you guys have any optical needs at all, binoculars, spotting scopes, tripods, anything to do with glassing, you've got glassing questions, anything to do with optics, give him a call at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also email him at optics@gohunt.com. I also want to thank KUIU, that's KUIU, KUIU Ultralight Hunting. You can find out more about KUIU going to kuiu.com. KUIU is the ultralight hunting gear that I wear on all of my hunts. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. I also want to thank phonescope.com. If you use the JScott19 promo code, you're going to get 10% off on all orders. That's the digiscoping device that I use on my iPhone X. If you're on my Instagram page and you see the videos and the photos that are taken through a spotting scope or my binoculars, that's from a phone scope adapter. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. And then onxmaps.com. If you go to onxmaps.com, if you use the JScott19 promo code, you're going to get a 20% discount on all orders. I use OnX Maps virtually every day, whether I'm fishing, hunting, looking at property, whatever I'm doing. I love the private and public land overlays showing you exactly who owns the property and where your location is. I love the breadcrumb feature. I love the satellite, the aerial, the topo, the hybrid mode. I use it on my hikes, tracking my distance and my speed. It's just a great application. Definitely go check out onxmaps.com. Use the JScott19 promo code and you're going to get a 20% discount. Guys, let's get right to this episode. If you've got any questions, comments, you can send them to me direct message on Instagram. That's at jscottoutdoors. You can also email me, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com.
Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're going to have a fun episode with Jerry Shavrnoch. And Jerry has drawn a Unit 8 Arizona Archery elk tag, and he had sent me an email saying that he had some hunting experience. It sounds like 7 or 8 years in Colorado over the counter. Has harvested one bull and had a bunch of questions for his Arizona Unit 8 Archery elk hunt. And I thought the best thing to do was to have this conversation, record it, and a lot of other listeners, I'm sure, have elk tags themselves and maybe can get some value out of the conversation. So with that, Jerry, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Jay. I appreciate you doing this and helping guys like me out that that have kind of struggled a little bit and and going into new areas, it's always good to have a little bit of experience to help you out with.
Sure. Just to add a little bit of context to this conversation, why don't you tell me and the listeners, just tell me a little bit about your hunting experience as far as archery elk hunting, and the success that you've had, and some of the struggles or some of the things that you think potentially you need to work on, or things that have gone awry, and then I can kind of have that in the back of my mind when we're having our conversation.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, started in 2008 and have been going out to Colorado primarily on and off over the counter tags, and really didn't have much experience except Midwest whitetail hunting, sitting in a tree stand and that type of thing. So a couple of buddies and I went out, and we certainly got in over our head in the beginning. I think our biggest issue over the years has really been kind of being a bit too timid with how we're addressing the elk, and really struggle just kind of finding them on those public lands. And then when we did find them, it's like, oh no, what do we do now, right? So there's a bull over there that's bugling or whatever. So like, okay, what do we do? We kind of freeze up, and so that's kind of been. Yeah, go ahead.
Totally understandable. Yeah. Yeah.
And then 2017, finally things came together, and I just we'd heard some elk the night before, and we set up our camp probably too close to where the elk were, but luckily I got in early in the morning, and I heard a bunch of elk talk, and I just kind of trailed them and did some cow calling behind them, and they went off into some deep thick stuff, and so I just kind of stood there and said, all right, what am I going to do? Well, I knew there was another little area I wanted to go to, so I had a little break in the morning, and then I turned around, and coming up the trail behind me were two bulls. And I was like, holy crap, they must have been trailing those other elk. And so I got an arrow knocked, and the one bigger bull, he had his nose to the ground and was just walking right up the same path that I did. And another smaller bull was behind a pine tree and just thrashing the pine tree and kind of, not really sure what was going on, but having a good time. And that the bigger bull, he didn't like what he smelled, so he just slowly kind of walked away. And the other bull, like I said, he was just kind of clueless. And I said, well, he's given me the opportunity, so and an open shot. So I made a good shot on him and recovered him later, and had a nice pack out. So that was been kind of our experience. We've had some other opportunities and just really haven't been able to seal the deal.
Okay. From your accent, it sounds like you're from the Midwest, maybe Michigan or somewhere like that.
Yeah, from Michigan. Grew up in the middle of the Lower Peninsula there, and then went to Michigan Tech University for an engineering degree up in the UP. And then got into the automotive industry down in Detroit area.
Okay.
Worked there.
And you live now in Arizona?
Yeah, about 2013, my family moved out here to Arizona, and it's been awesome. We really love it out here, and quite surprised. We'd been looking at moving to Colorado, just not too many automotive jobs in Colorado. So not really in Arizona too, but got lucky and found an opportunity here.
Good for you. One thing I hear you saying there that needs to be pointed out, talking about following some bugling elk, and then you kind of all of a sudden found yourself right between the herd. In essence, they had a couple trailer satellite bulls, following the group like you were following them. That's a huge thing for people to always understand, is that if you can kind of get in there with them, it's always kind of hard when you're behind them to follow elk, but a lot of times, if it's a real chaotic group, lots of bugling, and you're not too picky, you can kind of get in there and get some scragglers that are kind of coming up, from the back, and so it sounds like you did that. One thing I'll tell you, so is this your first archery elk tag in Arizona and first, bugling hunt in Arizona?
Yes, it is. It's my first bull tag. I did draw a couple of cow tags up in 7W early on, and was able to rifle hunt there, and I was able to shoot a cow up there 1 out of the 2 years. But yeah, first archery one, so yeah, pretty excited
So
about it.
one thing that immediately jumps out at me is if you're used to Colorado elk hunting, in Colorado you usually have to park at a trailhead and have, a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 miles, even more, of a hike in pretty rough, pretty steep terrain just to get back into the elk country. One thing that is going to kind of be throw you off a little bit, but I think in a good way, is that Unit 8, as well as a lot of the other units in Arizona, are just covered in roads. Most of Unit 8 is in national forest ground, and there are literally, pretty good gravel county type maintained roads all over the unit, and then there's, obviously 2-track roads throughout the unit. So you're going to be able to cover a lot more country quicker, more efficiently, being able to hunt from one end of the unit to the other a lot faster. And I think that's going to play into your hand of probably being able to get in more encounters than, say, you would in Colorado, where you have to hike 4 or 5 miles, and then once you get there, then you have to, camp, or, if you're just day hunting from a trailhead, seems like by the time you get up in there, the morning's already done, they're already moving to the bed. So make sure that you use the road systems in Unit 8 to your advantage. It sounds like you've already talked with the WM in the unit, the wildlife manager, and I would encourage you to talk to as many people as you can to talk about, specific areas, specific spots. But make sure, like when you're choosing a camp, that you choose a camp where you have pretty good accessibility, where you can go north, south, east, west. In other words, I wouldn't, unless you do a bunch of scouting and find a group of elk that you want to hunt, I wouldn't shoehorn yourself into one particular spot or the other. I would kind of camp in an area where you can cover, drive 10 miles one way, 10 miles the other way, and basically cover all corners of the unit from a kind of a centralized camping location. So let's start with that. And I know you've got a list of questions, so let's just dive into those questions, and then we'll chase little bunny trails as we go here.
Yeah, that sounds good. And that's kind of the advice the wildlife specialist gave me too. And you're spot on. It kind of throws me off a little bit, because then access roads and drivable roads mean to me more hunters, but I guess being a limited draw or draw type unit, it means that there probably aren't as many as I'm used to seeing out in Colorado.
Well, let me address that for just a second, because sometimes in Arizona, people will camp right in the middle of the elk, literally, like you may scout it out and they're like, you see elk in the same meadow every time, and it's right, not too far off a main road, off a 2-tracker, and there's somebody camped there. Very, very common. What I would tell you is, some of the biggest bulls in Arizona have been shot within eyesight of people's campers. So that's just the reality of it. So you almost have to just accept that. And those elk are pretty used to it too. Unit 8 is a very camping-oriented unit all summer long. There's people camping in all those different campsites. So those elk get used to it. It's not like they're going to come, eat out of your hand out of the camper door. But one thing to add is, they're not afraid to continue to rut at night in those meadows and areas where people are camped by, but they tend to boogie out of there in the mornings pretty early as people start starting their vehicles, their generators, and what have you. So if you do find some areas where bugling bulls are, make sure that you understand that they're probably going to get an early start. You may hear them bugling all around your camp, but they're probably going to start moving away back into the timber from there as soon as the first trailer light in the morning and the coffee maker goes on. They're going to start moving. So if you have to use that kind of as a strategy to, tuck in behind and let them all filter by you, that might be a deadly thing. But let's just dive into your questions now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things I was curious about, and I'm not really hung up on points and that sort of thing. I'd like to get a mature bull, but what kind of caliber bull can I expect in this unit?
Yeah, so Unit 8 well, let's take a general look. Arizona this year, with the moisture that we've had, phenomenal moisture, great winter. I'm expecting most all of the units in the state of Arizona to be at maximum capacity. In other words, bulls will be at their peak, whether they're a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old bull, whatever their genetics and whatever that particular bull, they're going to be at their peak. So in Unit 8, I think there will be some 360, 370, 380 bulls, maybe even a bigger bull harvested. I think if you're able to hunt the whole hunt, very feasibly that you'll see multiple bulls, in that 350 plus range. I think every day it would not surprise me if you have multiple sightings of bulls, 300 to 340. There's going to be a lot of those bulls that are 310, 320 bulls. I'm expecting a lot of nice 6-point bulls with 8-inch, 8 to 10 to 12-inch, fifth points. I'm expecting good fronts on most bulls. Unit 8, they tend to be, good, heavy, solid bulls. So, I mean, for you to shoot a bull over 300, that and most people having pretty good opportunities at multiple bulls over 300 would be my expectation. A lot of it's just going to depend on being at the right place at the right time. But I think if a solid, if you've only shot one bull and a solid 330, 340 bull gives you an opportunity, I would probably let them have it for sure. I mean, I don't want you to think that there's 350 bulls every single day, but I would bet that you'll see 330 bulls every single day.
Yeah, I think if I saw a bull that size, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I'm used to seeing the small ones, BC, Colorado. So it's, I think I'm going to have a hard time just kind of controlling myself and understanding, what I'm looking at, to be honest with you. So, I did, as a side note, I did find a couple of your articles on Go Hunt on sizing the bulls, and that was pretty good information using the magic 200 number. So I've been studying that a little bit to try to get myself ready and not have too much of an itchy trigger finger. So, but
I think it all comes down to like what you want. If you know right now you'd be happy with a 6-point bull that's a 300-inch bull, and you'd be just tickled pink, then if you get a good opportunity at a solid 6-point bull, shoot them and be tickled pink and put in for the draw. And one thing about being a resident is you can draw some of these tags. What I would call Unit 8 is kind of an upper middle tier unit. I mean, you can draw these with 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years. I mean, it's not like it's a lifetime, and you could likely draw 2 years in a row. So it sounds like your expectations are set. I've heard guys in your same position where they're like, I've killed one bull and I want to kill a 350 plus or nothing. Well, I think that's a bit ambitious because, not that you couldn't go out and shoot a 400. You could. I mean, you could literally shoot a 400-inch bull in Unit 8. They've shot them there. And I think this year is going to be phenomenal. Last year was a rough year. I think there's a lot of holdover bulls. But you have to be realistic with your own, I think a solid 320, 330, 340 bull, do backflips if you can get one of those.
I absolutely would. And, I'm kind of banking on what you said too. I drew this tag with, I think, 4 or 5 points and my percent opportunity was like 8%. So I had no expectation of drawing this. And in fact, my second choice was the same unit in November. And actually my buddy drew that one. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity that maybe in another 4 or 5 years I can get back in here or somewhere else. So my expectations aren't too high. I'm not looking to get on a magazine of a cover or anything like that. I just want to get a nice big bull, nice mature bull, and try to call them in, and or however that scenario works out. I'd be pretty excited with that.
Good.
And plus, I need to bring something home because my wife might give me a hard time because she really likes to eat elk. If I come home empty-handed. Okay,
great. Awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, one of the hardest things I think is getting started. Gosh, where do I start? I mentioned in the email I sent you that I did a little turkey hunting in this unit in an area, and it is off one of the main roads that cuts through Unit 8. And my concern was, wow, there's campers everywhere, and I didn't really run into any turkey hunters, which surprised me. But I was thinking that, man, this seems like it'd be a very, heavily hunted area. And in fact, I found a couple of bulls while I was in there turkey hunting, which was pretty cool. So that's kind of why I was trying to figure out, what I should do, where I should go, how to go about it, try to understand, where to expect the most hunting pressure, and whether that's because that's where the animals are, or that's because of the access.
Okay, so let me talk about Unit 8 specifically. Now, I don't know Unit 8 very, very well, but I know it a little bit. And what I would tell you is, you've got the stuff to the north, towards Williams and what have you. And the further north you go, you get tons of pines. And then as you go further out to the south, and as you kind of go out to the west, you drop off kind of what I would call like the plateau a little bit, and you drop down more into the pinyon junipers. And so Unit 8 has a mixture of country. It's got tons of pine trees, and then it's got what I would call pretty good low country, a lot of pinyon juniper. I would tell you that most of the hunters are probably going to be in the northern part of the unit, from the middle to the northern part of the unit. Most of the hunters are probably going to be, in the pine trees. Most of the camps you're going to see are exactly what I'm telling you, in those centralized areas where you can kind of go, north, south, east, west, and be able to get around. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The one thing, where do you start? What I would do, and what I always do when I have a tag in a new unit, or if I'm guiding in a new unit or anything like that, I take the unit, I get the Forest Service map, and I highlight your unit, okay, with a yellow highlight marker. Then I get on Google Earth, and I don't know how familiar you are with Google Earth, but I do the perimeter of my unit. So on my Google Earth map, I've got all of Unit 8. Then in white, I go start adding paths, and I actually trace all of the main, roads and arteries and two tracks and what have you. And I try and label my map as extensively as I can. If I see a dirt tank, if I see a stock pond, if I see a windmill, if I see other points of interest, I'll label them on my Google Earth map. And I've created a folder over on the left-hand side. So I've got I start with Arizona, then I go Unit 8, then I go, then I start putting, roads, water holes, glassing points, all that stuff. Okay, so once I have that, I import that map into my OnX maps. So on my desktop OnX, and I import that in there. As soon as it imports into my OnX, it automatically is on my phone app. So then I make a scouting trip up there to the new unit, and this is what I'm recommending to you. You've already been up there, but now you've got the map on your phone. I save that OnX map. You can save it in a 150-mile, a 10-mile, or a 5-mile radius. I save those in 5 miles so that I've got super high resolution. Then I go up to the unit, and I try and drive, and I tell people this all the time, I try and drive every road in the unit. Now, obviously, there's so many roads, you're not going to get to do that. So what I would do is I would pick some main north and south arterial, roads that you can cover tons of country, drive, 15, 20 miles south, maybe loop around and drive 15, 20 miles north. Then I'm going to drive a road that goes way out to the west, out to the east. I'm going to try and look at as much of the unit as I can. And when I'm driving, I'm going to be taking note of where does it look green, where does it look dry. This year it could particularly be green everywhere, okay? So if it's green everywhere, your elk are going to be spread out all over. If it's, real green pocket, and then, for 4 or 5 miles it's a real dry pocket, I'm going to make note of that, hey, this is dry. Unless some big monsoon rains come in and hit, probably the elk are not going to be in here. The other thing I'm going to look for is cattle. If there's tons of cattle or tons of sheep, I'm going to make a mental note of that, and I'm going to say, okay, this ground looks like it's pounded. The elk are probably not going to be here. They're probably going to be on the other side of the fence somewhere. I'm going to also take note of pasture fences, and I'm going to also notice where there's gates and where the access into those pastures are. And, you know, just because there's cattle in there right now, by September, the cattle could be out, it could rain on that ground, and fresh green grass come up, and all the elk pile in there. So that's something to consider. Just because there's cattle there now doesn't mean rule it out. Now, when you go back right before the hunt, if you notice all the cattle are gone, and you drive and get out and walk around, and you see all this fresh green grass, because the cattle will eat the old grass down, it'll rain on it, and fresh green grass, a lot of times the elk will pile back in there. So now that you've got a broad sense of the unit, how to get around in the unit, which roads are better, if you want to hunt way out west, I go up to the highway, take 40, come around and use the pavement, or no, this road's good, and if I blow down this road, I can get here, quickly. Also, once you have a feel of the unit, you have good mapping of the unit, talk to as many people as you can. If you run into anybody else that's hunted Unit 8, you might run into a turkey hunter that's, says, oh yeah, my uncle had an elk tag in there, and you should try, this area or that area. Make notes of it, but be familiar enough with your map that okay, when he says Round Mountain, or he says, whatever area he says, you can go, you recognize that without going, well, where is that again? So know your maps, know which roads, you can get around faster and what have you. That's how I start. Then I start looking at water sources. I start saying, okay, all these tanks west of this road are all dry, or all these tanks east of this road are all dry. Okay, that's something that I'll remember. Okay, that's not good because the elk are not there now. I'm also looking for tracks. If I see tons of elk tracks, I'm like, obviously the elk are here now. If I'm driving and see big groups of cows and calves, I go, okay, that's a good sign. The cows and calves are here during the summer. Probably when they start rutting, there'll be bulls that will show up. Any questions on what I just rambled off there?
No, not at all. No, I think that's a good strategy, and I am familiar with Google Earth. I use it and some other mapping software I have, and I do have Onyx Maps that I've had for about a year now, and it's pretty really good. I really like it. I have not used I've not pulled in Google Earth into Onyx Maps, so I'll give that a shot.
It's really easy. I kind of on Onyx, you just go to a thing that says My Content, and then you just go to a thing that says Import, and you can just import the file that you already have saved on your Google Earth, and it pulls it right in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I've pulled some tracks in, so it sounds like it's pretty similar to do that.
Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned something that is kind of one of my questions I had in here is you said, hey, if you find the elk in the summer or the cows in the summer, likely you might find some bulls in that same area. So the cows and they kind of stay in their same area. I mean, it doesn't seem like this is a big migration unit where elk are migrating north and south or east and west, from what I can tell. So, focus on finding the cows early here because they might be easier to spot, and then when you get back in there, then that might be a good opportunity to find the bulls. Is that kind of what I was hearing?
Absolutely. So in the summer, what I'm doing is I'm looking for cows. I'm looking for cows and calves, and I'm looking for big numbers of group, and I'm looking for green grass. I'm looking for as many elk as I can find. I'm marking them on my Onyx maps. I'm making a mental note of, okay, I saw 15 cows here. Okay, I saw a big group of 50 cows here. And I'm going to go back as it gets closer to the season, and I'm going to check the sign, check the tracks, check the water holes. I'm going to make sure that those elk that I found in the summer are right there. And more times than not, the cows will be in the same spot. So If you find them in the summer, or if you get down, Unit 8 is not real glassable up in the pines, but there are some bits of country to the south and out to the west in the pinyon juniper country. If you get up on a few of those knobs where you have vantage point, and you glassing out there at first light, and you see, big group of, 12, 15, 20 cows, and you see, you turn around and you look out somewhere else, you see, okay, here's another group of 30 or 40. I'm going to definitely make note of where are those cows, where are they out in the open, usually eating grass at night. First light, you catch them out there. More than likely, when September rolls around, that same group of cows is going to be in that same meadow, but now there'll be 3, 4, 5, 6 bulls around. So don't worry about necessarily where you see the bulls in velvet in the summer, because those bulls will move to the cows. It's not super common for especially older, mature bulls to be where they're at in the summer. Normally in northern Arizona, and 8, 9, 10, even 3C, 1, 27, a lot of those units, those bulls will move anywhere from 10 to 15, even 20, 30 miles. And they may be in Unit 10 and rut in Unit 8, or the bull that you see in Unit 8 in the summer may rut in Unit 10. So all you're trying to do in the summer is familiarize yourself with the unit, and try and find as many cows. Try and find the dirt tanks by walking around a dirt tank that look for cow elk tracks, and try and find the areas and group, the clumps of areas where the most elk are, and that you're going to hit the ground running when the rut starts.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. And I like this idea of what I call speed scouting. I've been really kind of just, all right, I'm going to pick this area, and I park the truck or camp there for the weekend, and I just start hiking in and just walking all day. Sounds like that's probably
that's awesome. Well, that's awesome. But what I would say is, what I would do is I'd drive camp in a spot, and pick a 2 or 3, 4 mile, area where maybe there's no interior roads. Drive the whole perimeter, okay? So you kind of get a sense of, okay, this is like a 3 or 4 mile square where there's no roads. And you go, okay, then park a truck, and if you have someone else there with you or something, park a truck and walk, and just cut cross country and try and look for sign, look for tracks. Are you seeing lots of elk tracks? Are you seeing no elk tracks? But you can also do that from the road. You talk about speed scouting. Go to as many water holes as you can and look for cow elk tracks. Obviously, if you've got a ton of cattle, you have to know the difference between a cow track or cow elk track and cattle track, which obviously they're smaller. And look for tracks in the mud. Look for tracks in the dust if it gets dry. But I would cover more country in your vehicle than on foot, but definitely doing some hikes and just getting out in the country, and getting a sense of the way the land lays. There's a lot of canyons and a lot of drainages in Unit 8. What I found in Unit 8, look for that oak. There's like oak brush, and there's like oak trees. They love being around that oak. So if you've already found a place in turkey hunting that's got quite a bit of oak, typically there's a lot of elk around that oak. And depending on acorn crop, they could be just stacked in there. But yeah, cover as much country in the vehicle as you can, and then get out and walk around as much as you can as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's exactly where I saw those couple of bulls when I was turkey hunting. Was up on a ridge that had oak trees all around it.
They love it.
Okay. Yeah. Good advice. Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. So maybe if we move into trying to understand. Let me back up. So the junipers, I haven't really hunted too much in the junipers, but when I've been in there, it seems really dense and rocky in some of these areas here. And one of the areas I've been in is like Hell's Canyon, kind of Hell's Pocket area, and it's just flat up on top there, and it just looks like a place that elk wouldn't be. Are they? What are they eating in there? Are they eating the juniper berries or?
Yeah, they'll eat juniper berries, pinyon nuts, and juniper berries. But again, look for sign. And one thing I forgot to add is look in the summer for areas where there's old rubs, where the trees are torn up. If you go and you're walking, or you go and you're driving and you don't see any old rubs, you don't see where the trees are literally torn up, the branches are torn up, and then all of a sudden you get to an area and there's rub, that's an area that the rut, the year before, they were in there thick and tearing up. Now, it's not foolproof. In other words, it doesn't mean for sure they're going to be in there, but if it's green, and, you know, if you saw tons of rubs but there's no grass in that area, I would probably go, okay, it's dry here, they're probably not going to be here. But if you see tons of rubs and there's green grass everywhere, that's definitely an area that I would mark on my onX maps that I found lots of rubs in this area, and make sure to come back in September prior to the hunt or during the hunt and just look for rubs. A good rule of thumb is if you just look for rubs, you can find those areas where those bulls are going to be really thick in September from prior years. And literally you can walk or drive and find those areas where you'll see them from the truck, like rub, mark it. And you'll drive for 2 or 3, 4 miles, nothing, and all of a sudden you just see rubs. That's a huge indication that that's kind of a rutting pocket. But back to your pinyon junipers. Pinyon junipers are phenomenal areas for elk to bed in. And it's also, pinyon junipers are also awesome for stalking because it's such tight quarters. One of the challenges in the pines, especially in Unit 8, is a lot of that's been prescribed burn. A lot of it has been clear-cutted where, yeah, the elk are in there, but you can't get within 150 yards of them because there's no cover. The beauty of hunting in pinyon juniper country is you can literally get on the other side of a juniper from them and they don't know you're there. And so all they have to do is step out and you've got your shot, and it's a 15-yard shot. So I personally love hunting pinyon juniper country. I would tell you that find those pinyon juniper areas, but find where there's meadows and where they have access to get out at night and feed in the open areas, and then they have access to go into the pinyon junipers to bed. Does that make sense? So,
yeah, it does.
So if it's just solid junipers and there's no place, because if you've noticed inside those thick pinyon juniper pockets, there's not a lot of grass. So you have to find those areas where there's meadows and areas where there's grass growing. They'll be out there at night rutting around, and then they'll dive into the junipers to go bed up, and then they'll come back out of the junipers to feed. And, you know, if you find those places and find those trails where they're using, a lot of times I'll get up on knobs and glass, you know, morning and evening on different knobs, and I'll try and say, where's the grass, where's the meadows, where are the clump of trees where I first see them come out. And a lot of times if you sat on that knob for 5 days in a row, those same elk are going to walk out of the same group of trees into the same meadow every day until someone bumps them or what have you. And then you can put that away in the back of your mind. If they always come out on the north end of that meadow, which means they're bedding in those junipers and they're coming out to feed, well, when you go hunt, you know right where they're at.
Right. Is this a strategy you use while you're hunting and scouting, or
both?
Kind of both?
Both, yeah. Okay. I mean, a lot of times through the hunt, things change, people bump stuff around, and you're having to kind of adapt. You're kind of having to, sometimes I'll just go glass in the morning or glass in the evening, and I won't even be hunting. I'll be trying, a lot of times though, I'm trying to focus on one particular bull, or I'm trying to find a bull of a certain size. So I don't care if the whole 14-day hunt, I basically scout the whole hunt until I find the bull we want to shoot. Then we move in and shoot the bull. To me, that's the beauty of what you're doing. You're not necessarily after the biggest bull in the woods. You're just after a nice bull. So you have the option of just diving in there with them when they're bugling and calling and chasing bulls. I like to target specific bulls, put my eyes on them, try and figure out what they're doing, watch them, monitor them. You know, it might be 2 or 3 days before we actually move in and try and kill the bull. But with your situation, you have the option to just, hand-to-hand combat, dive in there when they're bugling, and, just try and get a good bull killed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like the junipers kind of play into some of the calling strategies where the elk know where you're calling from, but they want to see you, and so they have to search you out a little bit more and get closer to really kind of find you, which sounds like it might lend for much closer shots and kind of setting up, that shooting lane that lets them get in there. That's okay. Yeah, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, and to take it a step further, I would kind of watch out for some of that country on the north side of Unit 8 and in the middle where it is so darn open. Yes, there'll be elk there, but you're going to spend days pulling your hair out because you can't get close to them, and everybody's chasing them around, but they're basically just chasing them, and they can't get within 100 yards of them, because you've seen those clear-cut areas where the pines are, trimmed up and it's been burned off, and you literally can, with your own eyes, you can see 100, 130, 40 yards, 50 yards sometimes. Well, it's very difficult to get in on, a bull with 8 cows when there's, 17, 18, 20 eyes looking at you. I guess it would never be 17 because it's always be a round number, but, it's fine. I like those a little bit thicker areas where exactly what you're saying. If you're calling, you can get close to them and you can stalk in close and then call to them, and they want to go ahead and close the distance and check you out and not hang up out there at 100 yards because they're like, I should be able to see the noise that's coming,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How is it? The junipers are, the other thing I think is they're pretty low to the ground, the branches and stuff, so they have a harder time looking underneath those to try to find you.
Absolutely. Juniper bushes give you phenomenal cover, and it's great what I call hand-to-hand combat. It's great for calling. It's great for trailing the herd. It's great for kind of getting out to the side of them and paralleling and then cutting in. A lot of times you'll get, intermixed just these little tiny stringer meadows where you can kind of anticipate the path that they're moving. You get the wind in your face. The wind's obviously in their face because they're always going into the wind. But now you're paralleling them and you kind of button hook. And a lot of times, if you get the right juniper situation where it's kind of just not the super thick stuff, but where it's kind of a little bit broken, a lot of times that gives you the opportunity to pop out in your 30, 40, 50-yard window where they're going to file through, and you just wait for the cows to go, and then you just draw back, and you get a 30-yard shot because the bull's going to follow the cows. So I would not overlook the juniper country in Unit 8 at all.
Okay. Yeah, I was a little concerned about that area, just kind of based on some of the advice from the Game and Fish website, where they say, hey, the September stay in the 6,000, 6,500 foot elevation range, and some of that juniper gets a little bit lower than that. But
yeah,
okay.
And yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. But if a lot of the pressure is up in the pines, and yes, you'll hear bulls, and yes, you'll see bulls, but you're trying to kill a bull. So the closer you can get with a bow, the better off it's going to be. So don't overlook that oaky country, and don't overlook that juniper country at all.
Okay, awesome. Sounds great. Now, when you get into that situation where you say, all right, there's some animals over here. These bulls, the elk in Arizona, they're pretty responsive to the calls or bugling, or is it just kind of, hey, I'm going to set out a location bugle and then cut the distance and start cow calling, and you got any good tips for strategies on closing that distance on them?
Yeah, for sure. So my impression is you're going to hear more bugling in Unit 8 than you've probably heard in Colorado the 7 or 8 years combined. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact that you don't have a 5 or 6 mile hike every day to get up to the elk country or get into the elk country. You can, especially if you're able to use your vehicle at night and drive and listen and find the rutting pockets, find the areas where there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 bulls just beehived up and bugling. Do a lot of that scouting at night, in the morning, early in the morning, after dinner, all night long. Try and find those pockets, and you'll figure Unit 8 out pretty quick. As far as strategies to get them closer and call them in, you've probably heard Chris Rowe of Rowe Hunting Resources on my podcast before. If you haven't, there's probably 15 or 20 episodes with him on the podcast. Highly recommend listening to all of those. I recommend Steve Chappell of Elk Camp TV. I was partners with him in the guide business for, I don't know, 8 or 9, 10 years. He's phenomenal, so I'd listen to his sounds and try and mimic his sounds. Listen to Chris Rowe. I would recommend joining Rowe Hunting Resources. He's got all these strategies in action and all these different scenarios, and he plays them out on video and talks about it. There's a lot of analysis. Plus, on my podcast, we do a lot of talking. But in general, this is what I want you to kind of get into is don't call too much. I don't know what level of caller you are. Call enough that if you need them to get going and bugling where you know where they're at, and then try and stalk on them as much as possible. And if you're a decent cow caller, try and get the wind right. Obviously, try and parallel them, try and kind of get out in front of them. And then if you're a decent cow caller, most of the time, if you get pretty close to them before you do much calling, a lot of times they'll come check you out. Another good tip is to don't call directly at them. Use your hand to kind of, if you want them to go to the right or you want them to go to the left, or you want them to go, come to you, don't call at them, call behind you. So in other words, turn your head and you can kind of direct the sound, and you want them to walk by you, right? You don't want them to walk straight at you. You understand that, right?
Oh, yes. Yes,
okay,
I do.
So you use your hand to kind of direct the sound. Obviously, you've got to play the wind. And I don't do a ton of bugling. I don't actually do a ton of calling. I do it very strategically. I try and, they're bugling on their own. There's no need for me to call. If you get out and you're hiking over to your spot and they're already bugling, I would be just slipping in quietly. I would be using, some sort of bear's feet or safari stalker or something on your feet to walk quietly. And I'm just listening. I'm trying to listen and look for any elk that are close, but if they're already bugling, there's no need to call. Obviously, always be checking the wind. Get as close to them as possible, and then try some light cow calling. See what kind of response you get. If you get more comfortable and you make pretty good cow sounds, you can actually call in a lot of bulls by getting inside of 70, 80 yards before you even make a peep.
Okay, yeah, I like that idea. I'm sure I think I'm a better caller than I really am, but
you know if you've gotten good response, and you'll know pretty quick if you're a good caller. If they're coming to you, then you're a pretty good caller. If they're constantly going away from you, then you're probably not as good as you think you are. So you'll just have to find that out when you get up there and mess with them.
Yeah, I am a member of the Rowe Hunting Resources, and I really, really like that membership and website. It's been phenomenal.
It's a great resource.
Yeah, just the whole concept of understanding what are the elk saying and what you should say back and how and when. That's right. been awesome. I'm studying that quite a bit. So okay.
Right, and I don't want to throw the buglers totally under the bus, because there are guys that bugle very, very well and they know when to call and what have you, and the bugle can work great. It can especially work great, just trying to kill pretty much any, decent bull. So, if you blow the bugle and you get good response, then I would say, use it. But it's very rare that I can see guys bugling and bulls actually like charging and coming over. I see more people having success with cow calling and having bulls run them over than with bugles. So in my mind, bugling is something you do to get something fired up. You don't hear anything. You bugle one time and 2 or 3 bulls answer. Now that gives you a chance to move in their direction. I very rarely see someone that can just take a bugle out and just start just literally bugling one bull after another, just coming straight in.
Right. Yeah, and you know, and for me and the guys I usually hunt with, that's kind of the scary part, where we've run into our timidity, right, or our reluctance to be aggressive is our calling hasn't been that strong, and we're always afraid of blowing them out, and it could be, you know, some of that whitetail hunting hangover that we have, where, you know, the whitetail are pretty twitchy and don't tolerate a whole lot. But,
well,
okay, yeah.
I think these Arizona elk, you're going to find they're a lot more tolerable than some of your Colorado elk. The Arizona elk are pretty used to people. They're, you know, a Colorado elk, if they smell you, you know, they're 3 drainages over, and it'll take you 5 hours just to get back to them. Arizona elk, I've seen them when they're, you know, all rutted up and going nuts. They smell you. They run literally 300, 400, 500 yards, and they go back to doing what they were doing, screaming and tearing it up. So you've got to be aggressive in the fact that you've got to get that button hook down. You've got to get, you know, the wind. They're always going to be going into the wind, period, always. Okay?
Yeah.
So the trick is you always have to have the wind in your face, but you've got to get parallel with them, you know, parallel, and then hook in, where when you hook in, your scent doesn't blow to them, it's blowing past them. It's still blowing parallel with them, but you're close enough where you can get into shooting position.
Use a crosswind instead of...
Yeah, exactly. And then they're always going to swing downwind to try and get your wind of the sound. So if your friend is going with you, make sure that he understands that they're always going to swing to the downwind position of the sound. So he needs to be upwind of you, because they're going to swing downwind of him. Do you understand that?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay. You can almost predict where they're going to come. They're going to cut 30 yards below that sound that he's making, and you can position yourself 30 yards on that side, on the downwind side of him, and pretty much going to have a pretty close shot, because they're going to circle him and you'll be right there in position.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I think most of this hunt I'm going to be solo, and you know, fortunately I do have the whole season to hunt. I was able to get that taken care of. So I think hopefully I'll have a couple buddies come out every once in a while, maybe on weekends or a day or two, but mostly solo hunting.
I would also tell you to, you know, being a Midwest hunter where you kind of grew up hunting and stuff, is do not overlook the potential of setting a ground blind or a tree stand on a good wallow or on a good water hole that you find. Obviously, I need to warn you that if you do it on water holes that are very easily accessible, right off roads, and, you know, you always see trucks parked there, I wouldn't even mess with those. But if you find, you know, some little spot kind of in the middle of nowhere, or just some spot, or you park your vehicle and just put a little sign that says hunter on stand, if it gets warm during the hunt, those bulls will pound those wallows. They'll get their cows settled and bedded down, and they'll slip back at 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and they'll go lay down in the mud and roll around in those wallows. So, I mean, if you find a tank that's just getting hammered, or a wallow that's getting hammered, I would not hesitate, unless you strictly want to kill one hand-to-hand combat, I would not hesitate to get up in a tree stand and sit there and have, you know, probably multiple opportunities at good bulls coming into those wallows.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering how effective that was. I have heard, you know, call them horror stories of you know, conflicts at water holes and so on, and that most of those are usually easily accessible. But you said something that I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit. You said put a sign out that says hunter on stand. Did I hear you correctly? Yeah,
I mean, so a good thing to do is, if you've got a spot and you're going to be consistent and you really want to sit there and you haven't seen other people around there, you know, get there early. Don't ever, if you're planning to sit a spot, don't come in late and then be mad at someone else that's already there. Get there early, park your vehicle. Like, if let's say it's it's like a county road, and then there's kind of a main 2-tracker, and then then there's a little 2-track that drives down to the tank, and maybe it's 300 yards away. Well, park your vehicle up where it forks down to the tank, and park your vehicle so it's real clear. I'm a hunter. Put a little paper plate that says hunter on stand, hunter in tree stand, and 99% of hunters are going to go, oh, there's a guy sitting there, okay, and they won't walk down to the tank, they won't drive down to the tank, they won't bother you, and a lot of times they'll leave. Most of the time that's going to happen. I think a lot of stuff where people take advantage of that is they start nailing up on trees, hunter down in stand. Well, they're not even down there. I would say I've seen them where people put them by their vehicles and just say, appreciate common courtesy, hunter on stand, good luck to you, and be there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't expect to roll up at 5:30 and, put your sign up. Get there way ahead of time. And then that way, if someone pulls up, they're like, oh, somebody's already here. And most of the time, people will respect that and move on.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. I never even thought of that. Cool.
What else
awesome.
You got?
Well, kind of the last thing, I think I have, because is, being mostly solo, and I'm assuming it's going to be fairly warm in September. What kind of tricks have you done to get the meat out? Maybe this isn't an issue because of all the roads that aren't too far from hunting areas, but do you have any good tips for
yeah, for sure.
meat here?
Yeah, for sure. First, do you have a truck? Do you have a quad? What's your setup?
So I have a couple of different things to do. I have a little sit on top Grizzly, Yamaha Grizzly, 4-wheel drive, and I have a pickup truck. So
So with the meat, what I would do because there's roads all over in Unit 8, what you're going to do is if you get a bull, the first thing you're going to want to do is if you can get it in the shade, get it in the shade. If you can drag it in the shade, great. The first thing you're going to do is you want to get that hide off of that elk as quickly as possible. So if you can get back to your vehicle and either get the vehicle to the elk or get your quad to the elk, that's what I would recommend. Get the vehicle to the elk and immediately start processing that animal. Get the hide off of that animal and get have your game bags and get the quarters off that animal and try and get it hanging, get air, breathing through it and get that cooling off. You could also potentially, if you're going to be by yourself, be prepared that if you could drive your truck to the elk, get a couple of come-alongs and potentially be able to use come-alongs and put the whole elk in your truck. If you're planning to take it to a processor, there are several processors right there in the Williams area. Also, there's a little town there, I can't think of it. There's like Parks. There's several processors. So if you could get that elk, whether you have to cut it in half or use a come-along and get it in the back of your truck and take it to the processor, that's one thing. But I like to skin the elk myself. I like to quarter it up and do the whole thing and get it hanging in game bags, get it hanging in the shade, and then take the meat in as quickly as possible to let it hang and cool. Sometimes those processors will let you just hang your meat there. At night in Unit 8, it stays pretty cool, so you could hang them, overnight if you shot in an afternoon and very first thing in the morning. Then I would take that meat in to the cooler. Sometimes they'll let you freeze it. And then, I like the gutless method. That's what I like the best. But the biggest thing is get the hide off of the meat as quickly as you can. And get it hanging as quickly as you can in the shade.
Okay. And then I thought I read somewhere in the regulations for Arizona, that some of the areas they allow you to drive up to a mile off.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd have to look to see if it's a mile, but you absolutely, in most all cases, are allowed to retrieve your animal with a vehicle. So if you can get your truck to it, if you can get your quad to it, I would have, your game bags and everything easily accessible. So as soon as you shoot an elk, you've got a game plan, and you've got your knives, your saws, everything you need. Your rope if you need to hang meat bags, all this different stuff. Have it in a specific bag that you either carry in your quad or carry in your truck or both, so that if you were to get one, get to it as quickly as possible and get to working on it as quickly as possible.
Okay. Yeah, that's good advice. Doing all the OTC hunting in Colorado, I usually have that stuff on me every day, as a kill kit and game bags. And I like that gutless method too. I think it's pretty awesome. And you think that's a quick enough scenario to get the meat cooled down in the middle of the afternoon?
The reality is, the reality is you don't have any other option. No matter when you shoot it, you've got to immediately get after it and start taking care of it, and getting the hide off it and getting that meat hung up. And, I would call some of the processors up there and find out, can I hang meat? If you don't do the processing, can I hang it to cool the meat? If they say no, just, keep calling around and know all of your options. Like, this place does allow me to hang meat. I want to do my own processing. Or go ahead, Casey's Processing in Flagstaff, and there's several in Williams. Find the ones that you want to use and figure out, are you open after hours? Can I call you at 2 a.m? Figure all that out so and maybe even stop by there and introduce yourself and say, if I get an elk, I'm bringing it. And they may say, hey, I have someone here 24 hours a day, and, here's the cell phone. If you get an elk down at 1 a.m., text me and we'll make sure someone's there. It's better to over-communicate.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, that's a good plan. Okay.
Awesome.
Hey, if I can circle back real quick, I know we've been maybe an hour here and probably need to wrap it up, but one of the things I forgot to ask you, when the bulls are vocalizing and so on, have you found that the bulls tend to shut down as the hunting pressure cranks up and guys are running around calling, and do they tend to get a bit more shy? Or do they
Unit 8 at times can be a finicky bugling unit. My anticipation for this year, as good as the feed is, I think it's going to be a good bugling year in Unit 8. What I can tell you is probably the opening day of Friday and Saturday, you're going to have good bugling action, and then it's very common to have kind of that Sunday lull because they've gone, with no pressure and all of a sudden quite a bit of pressure for those 2 days, and it's very common. We call it like the opening weekend Sunday lull. They kind of may be quiet Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and then I anticipate during the week, Monday through Thursday, Friday, before people show back up for the next weekend, you'll have good bugling action. But yes, Unit 8 at times can kind of, just kind of lull out. It just depends on how intense the rut gets. And I'm expecting you're going to have some mornings where you're just like, man, they were bugling like crazy. And then you could go back a couple mornings later in the same spot, and the same elk are right there, and they're just kind of a lot quieter. So Unit 8 is not one of the units that I would say is just a, Katie bar the door. It's just going to be a bugle fest the whole time. But you definitely are going to experience some mornings and evenings where they just go bananas. Again, I would highly recommend using your vehicle at night to drive, and we've talked about this a lot on my podcast and prior podcasts that you can listen to, but drive, stop the truck, roll your windows down, shut the lights off, just turn the truck off and immediately stick your head out the window. Don't open the doors. Just sit there and listen. and then drive down a mile and turn the truck off, sit there and listen. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and you'll find those pockets and those areas where there's, 10 bulls and they're going nuts. And mark it on your map and keep going and try and do that as much as you can. And if you do that for, the whole time you're there, you will find pockets of just bugling bulls. You may find that the west side or the north side or the east side, they're bugling way better over here. So hunt there for a few days, and then, okay, they've kind of shut up. Okay, now I'm going to drive at night and find some other pockets of bugling bulls. That's one of the most effective things you can do to cover country in a unit that you don't know very well, is listen for them at night. Don't call to them. Don't mess with them. They should be bugling on their own, and you'll be able to find those hot zones where they're going nuts.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Sounds good, Jay. I don't think I have anything else right now. I mean, it's a lot of information. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, no sweat. I hope you have a great hunt, and I hope you send me a picture of you with your first Arizona bull, and I think you'll really enjoy the experience of Unit 8. It's a really good, pretty, neat unit. You'll get the full Arizona elk hunting experience, and I would not surprise me if some really nice bulls come out of Unit 8 this year. I mean, it will not surprise me if, some 370, 380, 390 bulls come out of there this year.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I don't know what I would do if I saw a bull that size. Like I said, I'm used to those OTC Colorado bulls, and they're not as big. At least the ones I've seen haven't been that big. But awesome.
Well,
okay, yeah, for sure.
Hope you have a great hunt. Yeah. Hope you have a great hunt. I'm glad you're dialed in with Real Hunting Resources. Also, I've been doing a field judging elk kind of seminar tutorials on my Instagram. I don't know if you're on Instagram, but anybody out there listening, all summer long I'm going to be doing field judging elk, trying to help people estimate the actual measurements and also use the Magic 200 method. I'm also going to be kind of highlighting some of the better elk callers and point out some of the things that they do really well on my Instagram page. Any way that I can bring value, I appreciate all the listeners out there, and I appreciate your willingness to come on and kind of air your questions out for everyone, because I think a lot of people have a lot of the same questions you had, Jerry, so appreciate it.
Oh, no, yeah, no problem at all. Anything to help out. And again, I can't say thank you enough for what you've been doing for guys like us that are trying to get out there and hunt, whether it's elk hunting or turkey hunting.
Right on, buddy. Thanks.
Excellent.
God bless. Hope you have a great hunt.
Thanks, Jay. Take care.
All right, bye.